Welcome, everyone, to our Fireside chat on cloud disaster recovery, lessons in resilience from recent fails. I'm Jesse, Chief Technologist here at DZone, and I'll be the host today. Joining me is Ido Neeman, the CEO of Firefly. Our focus is on disaster recovery today, an often overlooked but very critical aspect of resilience. Ido, it's great to have you.
Hi, Jesse. Good to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to explore a variety of topics, have a lot of fun, touching on everything from the current state of cloud disaster recovery. We're definitely going to cover some high profile failures we've experienced. Can't wait to hear about those. And we're even going to cover future trends in the space, what Ido might see coming down the pipe. So be sure to stick around for the full discussion. To set the stage, let's talk about the state of disaster recovery today and where we came from. So cloud infrastructure has evolved very rapidly over the years. Ido, I'd love to know, to start us off, like what have you seen changing in the industry over the past few years? And how has that affected priorities for companies and their disaster recovery needs?
Great. So let's maybe start by taking a step back. Okay, let's try to examine how we got here. So it all starts, and I'm not talking about men discovers fire. I'm talking about on-prem IT. Okay, when we had on-prem IT, our disaster recovery plans or business continuity was to have another site, right? We had our data center in our basement, and in another basement on another branch of our company, we had another site, which we usually kept as two hot sites working, and we just have a failback to one of them, right? Then came the cloud. And one of the great promises of cloud is, hey, these amazing companies like AWS and Google and Azure and so on and so forth, they are the best of the best. They maintain it and it's always up. So initially we thought, hey, if we just use their services, they have baked in resilience for our infrastructure. So this is where the industry started to look a little bit differently about DRP, disaster recovery plan, right? It's not just that we need to now maintain another site and have all these hardware components and software and the manpower to operate it all. Now we just buy a service from our cloud provider and we have this business continuity embedded into our service. So this is how basically we came to where we at. But it's a little bit too good to be true. And just like in security, we have the shared responsibility model, same goes for business continuity. No one really promises us that out of the box we'll have multi-region, multi-availability zone, availability, and business continuity. So today, we're here to discuss how we, as IT leaders, as people that build software and services on the cloud, should think about disaster recovery and business continuity.
That's awesome. And as you were talking, it was playing in my mind. I'm thinking, it's cloud for me, but it's on premise for somebody. Right? It's still some physical machine somewhere. And so we still have to worry about all of those things. I thought that was really interesting as you were talking. But yeah, we move all that stuff to the cloud because there's a huge promise there, right? We have high expectations. And as we talk about those expectations, us as a company, we move stuff out there for like downtime, operational impact. Like, why do you think that as we move things out to the cloud, we just forget about all of that stuff?
Mostly because it's easy. It's easy to forget because now we're just thinking, hey, 20 years ago, I had to ship servers and routers from Arizona to Germany to have another site. And today, all I need to do is have one command in my AWS CLI, and I have another availability zone or another region in Germany. So I think it's easy. And yes, it is true that the large cloud providers, they do give us embedded resiliency. Because if one availability zone goes down, okay, they probably have embedded resiliency for most, it's important to say, most of the services into another availability zone. But what about multi-region? Okay, what about if another entire region goes down? You need to think about it. Then there's the problem of the modern cloud architecture is much more than just buying services from one cloud provider and stitching them together. You have multi-cloud, then you stitch it all with multiple infrastructure as code solutions. Then you have your own Kubernetes stack, maybe some serverless stack. Then you use some third-party applications, right? Some might use Okta, others might use Datadog, some can use MongoDB Atlas, and so on and so forth. PagerDuty, NS1, IBM stack, so many things together. So it's not just, even if we had all of the things from the cloud provider really backed up for us and ready for a disaster, it's not good enough. And I think this is something that is more often than not overlooked and forgotten by industry leaders.
Yeah, your point's great. It doesn't cover everything. And this idea that industry leaders are overlooking pieces of it, like what are some of these misconceptions that you see people have about the cloud? I know we've talked about a couple of them, especially with what they think these companies are protecting. And you just said it. What are those things that they're overlooking?
So I think if we can start to talk about some recent incidents, let's start with two of them. One is very much public, the other one is less public, but we saw it at Firefly with one of our customers. So one, the very public one, is CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike, obviously, the CrowdStrike
everybody knows that one, yeah.
Yeah, earlier this year, CrowdStrike had a massive outage due to a software release process gone bad, and I feel bad for everyone that got hurt and damaged from this. But it actually showed us that one piece of your tech stack can go down, and your entire chain of IT is going down with it. So this made a lot of people in this industry to rethink their business continuity. Am I dependent on one vendor? It can be as big as CrowdStrike or even bigger. Am I dependent on them to maintain my service up and running? If they or when they will go down, everyone has downtime, even the largest cloud service providers, everyone had downtime. When they go down, am I good enough for the SLA agreement to get some money back in credits, or do I need to keep my service up and running for my customers internally and externally? Obviously, I need it. So CrowdStrike told us that we're not really thinking about the entire tech stack composition, how everything is well connected. Let me give you another example. One of our customers, I can't disclose the name, unfortunately, because this is very sensitive, but they had a problem with their Okta stack. By a mistake, someone changed the entire configuration for their Okta. So now all the service accounts that are used to be authorized by Okta are not authorized in the proper manner. And Okta, by definition, is the keys to your kingdom.
It's single sign-on for everything, yeah.
Exactly. So now what? What do you do? Okay. I can tell you what they did with us, but I think those two incidents, and we can later go into an even better example of overlooked incidents. This tells us that when we think about disaster recovery, we just think about a way to take our cloud infrastructure and replicate it to another region or maybe even another cloud. But we're not thinking about the bigger picture of having more and more components into our stack, and having even if we let's say I'm using Azure, Microsoft Azure Cloud. Let's say Microsoft gives me the assurances that everything can be replicated to another availability zone. Okay, fantastic. It's not enough. It's not enough because you have those as SAML providers. You have your Kubernetes. You have your CDNs. If you are using even just 5% of external or internal, but outside of the Azure stack resources, you're not able to be disaster recovery ready.
Yeah, it's so much more. I'm sitting here thinking about this. I'm like, we started, and I remember escrow backups. You know what I'm talking about? Like taking the tapes and shipping them off site, and we thought we were safe,
Yeah.
and then it turns out, well, what about this? And now, as you're sitting here talking about it, our applications are so complicated, right? It's not even, it's hybrid environments. It's probably multiple cloud environments. You just mentioned Azure, but I may still use an S3 bucket for something else. It's databases that are local. And I mean, it's like this web that you're describing, all of these things interconnected. You have to make the whole thing hardened and able to come back up. And that, I agree, that's a lot of people don't realize that. That's great information. And when we're covering things like CrowdStrike all over the news, right? Everybody was, I mean, millions of people affected, planes having a hard time landing. It was amazing to think about. But these incidents that happen, in your opinion, Ido, like what? I want to make sure we get some practical advice. I know you have other stories, but just based off of the stories that you shared, like how do we help people fix this, right? And I do want to hear. I know you have at least two other really high profile cases. The whole thing is high profile cases, so if you need to throw one of those in there, but I want to drive that point home that we're getting at. It's more than a data backup, right? It's a whole web of interconnected bits. So let's dig more into that.
Exactly. So let's start to unpack, because you mentioned at least two big points here. One is, yes, the implication of an outage is huge. So we should probably be ready for it. So where the industry is focused on today, what is disaster recovery plan, program, or business continuity plans? Today, at least in my opinion, they are focused in data protection. We are taking care of the most important thing, which is don't lose our data and our customers' data, which I agree is the first thing to consider. I don't want to lose my customers' data ever. And everyone signs those DPA, data protection agreements, to make sure that they are safe and protected. This is great, fantastic. But after you think about this replication of data, what about the business continuity of the actual infrastructure? But yet, because yes, you might have salvaged the data itself, but if your application is down because you don't have infrastructure, okay, so you didn't lose, but you're still in downtime. Now you can be in downtime for hours, days, weeks, or months. So here's another example, which I think is a very good thinking point for anyone that runs large cloud deployments. Another incident from this year is from an organization called UniSuper. UniSuper is a pension fund out of Australia. They woke up one day to find that the cloud infrastructure on Google Cloud Platform was accidentally deleted. And then they figured out that their backup accounts were also deleted. And it wasn't those accounts and infrastructure weren't deleted by UniSuper employees, neither by hackers. It was an edge case, but a severe edge case by Google itself. Because as you mentioned, as the cliche says, there's no cloud, it's just someone else's computer. At
Yeah.
the end, Google runs massive databases, data centers, the best of the best, and they had a glitch. It can be an edge case, but you don't want to be the one that suffers from the edge case.
Yeah.
And this glitch made those accounts to be deleted. So now what? Now you have a very
And we cry. We cry at least a little bit. That's what.
I hope it ended with crying and not something more, but you have a very respectable organization that works with one of the three largest cloud providers and a major engineering organization like Google working together to bring this back up. So now what? Okay, someone very, very smart at UniSuper made sure that the data is backed up and protected in another place, another cloud. Fantastic, they didn't lose the data. But still, it took them more than a week to go back up with their application. And why is it? Because when we look on the backup industry today, the data protection, the disaster recovery industry today. You know, great vendors like Rubrik and Veritas and Cohesity and many other great honorable names. They all back up the data. But what about the infrastructure? It's okay to have the databases. It's okay to have the VM images. But if I don't have the network to put it in, if I don't have the IAM users, the IAM roles, the API gateways, the storage buckets, the queues, everything that comprise the platform, the cloud platform, right? What do I do with the data? Yes, I didn't lose it, but now I need to repave, rebuild the entire infrastructure. So basically, the entire cloud industry is neglecting its own work. We are saying, hey, what our backend engineers and data engineers and everyone is doing is worth backing up and worth being ready for business continuity. But what we're doing with DevOps and SRE and platform engineering and DevSecOps, all the work that we're doing, oh, it's not important enough for us to back up, right?
Right.
So this is what's overlooked. You might salvage the data, but if you don't ensure proper backup for your cloud infrastructure itself, you're doing a disservice to yourself at best, and sometimes you're breaching some of the agreements you're signing. Because believe me,
Yeah.
I'm going through a lot of enterprise level agreements with our customers. They're all asking for business continuity for your cloud operations. I think very, very few companies actually think about those use cases. I hope I'm wrong, but from what I'm seeing, it's differently. So
But
I think
yeah,
this
but
is
even
where
if
we
they're
are.
not, I mean, how do they get there? Like infrastructure as code. Like I was talking with another engineering guy, and his DevOps team, they code it all. They have the infrastructure as code. But what you're talking about, a lot of companies don't have that. How do they get it? Like, where can they
Correct.
start?
So the good news is the solution is closer than we might think. I'm not trying to say it's extremely simple, but it's not extremely complex. So what you need to do, just like if you're using a backup solution for your data, you constantly, or not sure if it's constantly, but every once in a while, let's call it a nightly backup. Every
Okay.
night at midnight, you look at your databases and VM images, and you take a snapshot and you back it up and you store them somewhere safe. So you can do the same for your cloud configurations, right? I can every night at midnight scan my entire cloud. And when I say cloud, it's not just my AWS or not just my Azure or not just my Google. It's all of those three clouds and more, OCI and IBM and Alibaba Cloud. And
Yeah.
I need to also scan my Kubernetes parts. And I need to scan my Okta, as I told you about our customers. And I need to also scan my MongoDB and my Akamai and my Cloudflare and my PagerDuty, because all of these are part of my infrastructure. If I scan everything, now I have a backup of it. Fantastic. But unlike the data, where if you have your database backup and you just throw the data into it, it's operational again. I can just take those configurations and tell AWS, hey, bring that back up, especially if it's my Kubernetes that I'm managing. They don't use those Helm charts as part of their stack, right?
Oh yeah.
So I need to solve it. But sure enough, this is a problem that we solved as an industry. It's called infrastructure as code, right?
Yeah.
Because this infrastructure as code concept allowed me to manage my infrastructure configuration as code, and everyone can store code. So if I'm able to scan everything in my infrastructure and have constant process of taking it and baking it into code, I can now just store it in Git. Now, not only that it's backed up, it's also versioned. And now, infrastructure as code allows me to take any piece of my infrastructure and redeploy it, because this is what infrastructure as code was all about. Take code and create infrastructure of it. So this is the simple version of it. If you take your cloud infrastructure, you scan it, and you constantly back up into code, you are, with a very important asterisks and some disclosures, basically ready for your next disaster. You can say that you support business continuity. So I have some other aspects to add here, but let's see if I manage to convey this idea in a reasonable way.
Yeah, and I like that idea because I'm thinking as you're constantly updating your infrastructure, I reckon it to how we do data backups, versioned, partial backups versus full backups, right? So maybe we do a full backup every week, and then we do intermediate or partial backups on just what's different every night. What's fascinating to me is it allows us to make sure that the data backups, which we're probably already doing, right, match now. We have timestamps and we can match those things so that you make sure your infrastructure as code, all the configurations and stuff match the data for when you want to, redeploy them or you need to bring them back out of the closet,
Exactly.
So I think that's what you were getting at. And it makes a lot of sense to me because it simplifies the recovery process for everything. Am I right?
In a sense, but now let me throw a curveball at you. So let me
Okay.
tell you a story from another one of our customers. Again,
All right.
I apologize. It's under NDA. I can't mention the name. But if you remember last year, we experienced a very large hack into MGM, right? And one of our customers is in the hospitality industry. And obviously, everything that happens within industry shapes this industry across. So they had a drill now, an exercise in imagining, hey, if MGM breach was our breach, how would we recover from it as fast as possible with minimum impact on our business and customers? So CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, comes in and say, hey, I would have spot those and those accounts in the cloud being contaminated. And I would tell you, hey, I found a breach. Let's contaminate. And now these accounts are suspended. You can't touch them. And I'm stopping the breach. We're golden. We're good to go. We delete them. Okay. Now come head of SRE and head of platform engineering. And they say, okay, but we have applications running on those accounts, but you're not allowing us to touch them anymore. So our IAM roles can access those accounts. How can we replicate data from it? So you say, I have everything backed up in infrastructure as code for me, right? It's great. We just talked about it because this company is doing what we talk. They constantly scan their cloud and they store it into infrastructure as code in Git, so it's versioned, and they can redeploy it. But what's the problem? The problem is that the code is extremely proprietary for those specific accounts. To be extremely resilient or immutable, you need to have an immutable code, and a code that is not just specific to certain account, a code that can be deployed into any account that you'd like, any availability zone, any region, and be in different specs. So to do that, their idea, which we support obviously, and we encourage them to act this way, is to codify, to create infrastructure as code, their infrastructure into modules, right? Because now if I have a module, you say, oh, hey, instead of using Jesse's production account in, let's say MGM is in Nevada, now just use Jesse production 2 account in North Virginia. Okay, and if in North Virginia I'm not needing a 2 extra large server, I just need 1 extra large server, it's just all in my variables. So this is the next level of being really ready for it. If not just scanning and saving the configurations in code, but making this code immutable with modules and variables, you are really protected. You have a really robust and immutable business continuity plan for your cloud infrastructure.
And then if you ever do need another hot zone or another, spin up, it's like that because it's completely agnostic to the account and the location and all that stuff. That's smart. I like that a lot.
Exactly. I will say that reality is a bit more complex. Nothing is reality as fast as right? Like you can always say, hey, spinning up a server in AWS is it's nothing. But if you want like real application in another region, there's always some stitching, but it's not something that will take you 4 days. It might take you 4 minutes. It might take you 2 hours, but
Hours, yeah.
after 2 hours is complex if you want, but with minutes, 2 hours, you're set up with another hot zone, which is fully compatible and fully repeatable. Because what's important for IT leaders? They want repeatable infrastructure. Part of the reason that we want business continuity is because we want to be repeatable. We don't just want to have hot fixes that are unpredictable. No, we want repeatable infrastructure.
Right.
Using infrastructure as code allows us to get there.
That's perfect. And storing everything as code, again, matching up agnostic to whatever zone that you want to deploy in, whether it's Virginia, US East, Germany, wherever, or caring about the different account itself. I love that, because that, I mean, the larger the infrastructure, the idea of the modules making more sense to me, because that offers just an additional level of resilience into the system, which I think it's awesome. So, I really, we're right at about the 30-minute mark. I want to know, how do people get started? Like, what practical advice for those listening out there? What practical advice would you give them on, hey, we've told them some real world examples that are a little scary. They're probably thinking, hey, this is happening in my company somewhere. I'm going to leave this scary discussion from Ido and Jesse, and I'm going to walk down to my DevOps team. And I want to ask, do we have this in place? And if we don't, like, how do they get started doing something?
So the first step would be to make sure that your cloud infrastructure is fully codified, fully covered with the infrastructure as code. And that doesn't matter which flavor of it. It can be Terraform, it can be OpenTofu, it can be CloudFormation or Azure Arm, or if you'd like to use something like Pulumi or something newer or older, it doesn't really matter. Let's use Terraform just as an example because it's the most popular one.
Popular, yeah.
So you need to make sure that everything in your cloud is properly codified into Terraform. How do you do it? It's a little bit complex, but there are some techniques there. So you need to understand and evaluate your IAC coverage. After you're close to 100%, keeping 100% in an evolving cloud is very, very hard. But let's say that you are now feeling confident, most of your cloud is codified. You need to keep it this way. So you need to start monitoring for drifts, because a drift will show you that your infrastructure in code and your infrastructure in cloud are not the same. So codify your infrastructure, make sure you have no drifted infra, and then the last part would be make this infrastructure as code stack as immutable as possible. Adopt modules, make sure all your variables are correct, and use it not just for what you believe or what the cloud service providers try to tell us is the first cloud citizens, but make sure that everything in your Kubernetes clusters. Again, I have another story of someone that accidentally changed their entire cluster configuration, right? There, it's not Terraform, it's not OpenTofu, this is Helm charts. But if you have all the Helm charts correctly, it can be Argo directory, like Argo CD, which I personally like. So if you have everything codified, now you are ready to tackle any incident in your cluster. So have everything codified. Use Terraform or Tofu or anything else for cloud. Use Helm or Argo or anything else for Kubernetes. Codify those SaaS applications that became integral part of your stack, like GitHub, GitHub Actions, like Datadog, like PagerDuty, like anything else that the DevOps, SRE, and platform engineering teams are using. Codify everything. Don't neglect it. And then your worst case, you're golden and you don't need to handle with incidents. Medium case, you now have versioning for everything. Everyone wants to hit rewind for once in a while, right? Say, hey, yeah, I don't like this last revision. Let's go back for the version 2 days ago. How do you do it for infrastructure today? This is the way. Codify, manage in Git. And best, I don't know if it's worse or best case, you had an incident, something bad happened, you are ready, your business isn't down, you have no service disruptions, and you're meeting all your DR and business continuity goals.
Awesome. Well, we're approaching the end, but I do have to ask a fun question, right? So I want you to look into your crystal ball. Tell me what you see for the future of disaster recovery, configuration management. I mean, you're a CEO, founder, vision-y kind of guy. So what do you see coming in the next year, 2 years in the industry here?
Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of good things coming because the cloud is becoming more and more complex, more
Okay.
technologies,
Mm.
more vendors, more projects, more clouds, more infrastructure as code. It's becoming more and more complex. You won't have to be as big as CrowdStrike to have an awful, awful impact if something bad goes. So I see more outages coming out, and as those start to unfold, and more of them will be public because it will be with bigger impact because there are many, many small incidents that no one hears about. This is where the IT leaders will have to stop saying, hey, we are disaster recovery ready. All our questionnaires for business continuity are true. Yes, we run in the cloud and we have this vendor that backs up our data, so we are ready. No.
Yeah.
If infrastructure is important to you, and it's important for everyone, especially for cloud users, you have to back it up also. So as I see it, those incidents that unfortunately will come will make this industry look back and create the solution for infrastructure configuration, disaster recovery.
Do you think we have good solutions out there today?
Obviously, I'm extremely biased, and I'll say that
Shameless plug, yeah.
shameless plug, Firefly is the best solution out there. But as mentioned earlier, I think that if you have a good vendor to back up your data and you're willing to put the investment in scanning your cloud, in understanding how to create code out of it, in stitching everything together and compare it with modules and immutable infrastructure concept, yes, this is a great way to do it.
Awesome. Well, Ido, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Firefly for sponsoring this event. Obviously, a very important topic for every company out there that has information out in the cloud. We hope that you all out there who joined us got a lot out of this, have some points, some things to take back to your own company to make sure that your configuration backups as well as your data backups, do both, are happening for disaster recovery. So thank you for listening today, for joining us. We were so glad you're here. If you liked what you heard, head on over to dzone.com/events to see all of our on-demand content. Stay on with us for just 1 minute and answer a couple of questions. We'd love to make sure that we get your feedback for future talks. And until next time, keep innovating.